Hello, I'm Mario Toneguzzi, and joining me today is Sonya Sharp, who is one of the candidates for mayor in the upcoming municipal election. Thanks for joining us today, Sonya.
Thank you, Mario.
Okay, let's talk about priorities. What would
Mhm.
be your top priority if elected mayor?
I think I there's a lot of priorities to focus on. One of the things that people ask me about, what's my first priority? Like, what are you going to do the first day you get elected? And I think the most important thing is removing any red tape or bureaucracy that hinders members of council from doing their job. And you might ask what that is. And my response to that is this could be another new council. That means administration may want to, take control of, what gets presented to council or what could happen. And things are kind of happening behind the scenes already, and I'm seeing that. So that can't happen anymore. Like council needs to take control of city administration, council needs to take control of city hall and set policy and do what they need to do. And so there's a couple of things being proposed right now before the election that I'm not happy with. And administration knows that. So I would probably say that's one of the biggest things I'm going to do as my first priority.
Okay, wonderful. Let's talk about blanket rezoning, which is a huge
Mhm.
issue in this city. What are your thoughts about that? And would you repeal it if elected?
Yes. So I've been very firm and clear on my position of blanket rezoning. I've been firm and clear on my position of blanket rezoning before even the public hearing happened when I tried to, stop blanket rezoning from happening. And I brought a motion forward and it failed. And went through the grueling 4 weeks of public hearing, and I didn't support it after hearing all the feedback from majority of Calgarians who didn't want it. So repealing will be the first thing you'd have to do, and then reinstating gradual, zoning measures as in what was there before. So reinstating, having the members of public speak to their elected official on it. And so what you want to talk a little bit about that is we have removed the people from the process. The people were never the problem. The process is the problem and how efficient you can be. So you repeal, you reinstate what was there, and then you reform the planning department. And that's where you talk about timelines, efficiencies, engagement. So repeal, reinstate, reform are the key things that will happen from me when it comes to blanket rezoning.
Okay, let's talk about infrastructure. So,
Yeah.
from roads to water to transportation, what are your
Mhm.
thoughts about the state of infrastructure in the city right now, and what's your game plan around that?
So I would say the state of the infrastructure, we're behind, and everybody knows that. And the uncomfortable part about this conversation about talking about infrastructure is the water main break from last year. And no one's blaming council for the water main break. What we've heard is, how did we not know this was going to happen? And so it's really focusing back on the fact that we're 10 years behind in knowing what our infrastructure even looks like. Is it up to par to the changing landscape of our city? And so what really needs to happen is we need to have a better relationship with the industry and better read on understanding what that market looks like. When the water main break happened, it took a long time to even figure out what was going on and how do we, get things going till we can get water back for everybody. And so there is a lot to do around in like I would say infrastructure resiliency, infrastructure efficiency and effective delivery of infrastructure. There's projects going on all over the city right now, and businesses are being impacted, customers are being impacted, residents are being impacted. So we really need to start focusing on that. And I've already had conversations with the industry to talk a little bit about, I would say, support the industry, support city to do the work. And so I would say that conversation has been dormant for 10 years. And I think, we don't know what we don't know. And the best people to tell us what's wrong with some of our infrastructure are those that are in that business. And so building that relationship back that's been missing for 10 years is something I would like to make sure happens. And it will start happening once I'm elected. And the state of infrastructure in our city also has to go hand in hand with what we're seeing with density. If we're going to, throw up more buildings in some of these communities, what's the state of our infrastructure? Because that's going to matter when you start turning on taps and flushing toilets.
Hmm. The Green Line. How do you feel about the Green Line and moving that forward?
So I would say where we're at with the green line right now is we need to get the green line going, obviously, from the event center as far south as we can get it. And that's kind of what the first phase of this next, I would say, vision of the green line, because we've undertaken a lot of visions of the green line over the last couple of years. That really needs to get going. And I'm very supportive of that. And we got to get ridership in. We got to get people from the far south downtown, and then they can, hop on other modes of transit if they need to. Now, the other piece about going downtown and connecting downtown, there's a I would say a vision of what that could look like. Right now, everyone's talking about above grade. We talked a lot about what it looks like below grade, but it really needs to be flushed out. That's not just going to be something that we just decide that it's going to be above grade and it's done. There needs to be better conversations with the business community that could be affected by above grade rail. And what I mean above grade is more about like at the building level, like not ground level. And there needs to be more conversation of what that looks like for just the average Calgarian taking it. What does that look like, in the winter? What does that look like as a people mover? So, I'm happy to see the green line with shovels in the ground from Event Center South, but a bigger conversation has to happen with, the piece downtown, and then how we connect that north. I know there's always been a conversation about getting that train up to the north side, and they need it. So what does this look like? And there are still many pieces to this puzzle, but I really feel like putting these in phases is the best thing we can do to deliver that infrastructure project to its best ability.
Okay, not a lot of happy Calgarians out there with their taxes. Do you pledge to hold the line on this?
So I would say I am not pledging to freeze taxes. What I will say is I'm going to be looking for opportunities to reduce it. So find efficiencies in the corporation to reduce the tax rate. When you promise a tax freeze, you have to be very careful because that can come back to you in other, I would say, other ways. Like you could be there could be infrastructure gap, there could be capital funding issues. And we've increased taxes, or this council, I wouldn't say myself, I have never voted on a tax increase, about 22% over 4 years. And over the last 4 years, myself and a couple of my colleagues have brought motions forward to reduce that rate. And they've all failed. And that's okay because you learn from that. And we can look for more opportunities once October comes and we get right into the budget again. But I would be looking for reducing the tax rate, not holding the line, because I think where we're at right now is a place where Calgarians can't afford anyways.
Hmm. I hear a lot about City Hall, city administration. It's big, costly,
Mhm.
bureaucratic. A lot of developers I speak with concerned about the timelines when with building permits. First of all, what do you think about how City Hall and the administration is operating these days, and what would you do about it?
Well, my answer to this when I talk about administration, I generally, I'm not talking about the folks that are doing the work out that you see every day. I'm talking usually more about the top couple layers of the organization. And I do think that there are some governance issues. I really think that senior administration needs to be held a little bit more accountable for some of the things that council sees or what's going out in what you're saying about the developers or even some of the issues we're seeing around our city, like Marda Loop. Could be even Stephen Avenue construction. It's just underway. So there needs to be more of an accountability there. And my other big thing too, when I talk about some issues with senior administration, um, it's really talking about being more lean and efficient. I'm hearing the same thing you're probably hearing from our developers and our business community in just making sure you're focusing on what people that are building the city are asking for. That's one. But also, are you hearing and seeing the same things I'm hearing when I talk to Calgarians at the door? What am I getting for my taxes? What's going on these projects? Why aren't people being held accountable? Those are the questions I'm getting at the door. So we really need to have that conversation with with senior administration and say, do you really think this is working? And I'm not afraid to have that conversation with them. I've had that conversation with them. I usually do that at budget time. But I would say the people that are delivering the services every day, the ones, that are out there driving our transit and, picking up our garbage and recycle, like the frontline service groups, they're doing a stand-up job. They're doing what they need to do every day. And there needs to be a more of a discussion at the senior level to say, is this working? Do we have too many layers? And one thing I'll mention is myself and Councillor Chabot brought forward a motion to do more of an audit of the reorganization that occurred almost 5 years ago. It failed. And so what I'm going to ask those members of council that are running or is that supported a failure of that motion is, so you think everything's okay. And I don't think everything's okay. And Calgarians don't think everything's okay. So it's time to have that uncomfortable conversation with everybody and say, we need to be lean and focused. And we need to address some of these issues we're hearing from, the Calgarians, the doors, but also the people that are building our city.
Okay, one of the other issues that is quite heavily on the minds of many Calgarians and seems to be getting worse and worse, it appears out there, is public safety and crime. Now, whether it's on the LRT platforms or along the LRT line itself, on the train, or whether it's downtown on the roads or on the sidewalks of downtown, this is a big issue.
Yeah.
What do you plan to do about it?
Well, I mean, safety, it comes in different forms to different people. So, as Communities First, we have pledged about 500 new police officers over the next 2 years. And that's just catching up with the population versus police officer number. We're low in Canada. Now, that's not going to solve all our problems, and we know that. And there's other issues here that we need to talk about what our roles and responsibilities are. So when we talk about performing our responsibility well, like funding police and fire and transit safety, we can do that. But there's a bit of a void in here that the province needs to step up on. We have, we play a supporting role as the city of Calgary when it comes to mental health and addiction issues. We can definitely support the province on what they want to do. We can give land to the province if they want to build facilities. But there's a delineation here. And how I explain this is, if you look at the Schumer site, the building itself in the inside is not the civic responsibility. On the outside of that building and surrounding that building is my responsibility. And that means keeping the area safe. We talk about people walking by. We talk about Central Memorial Park. We talk about people that just need to use the hospital. And there are some serious issues around that building. It's not going to solve overnight. And we all know that. But we need to have that conversation. And I feel like everyone is just kind of throwing the football back and forth. So, like, I've had this conversation with the province and just said, like, we have a responsibility for Calgarians first as a civic governance body, and you have a responsibility for all Albertans as well. So we're serving the same people. But what role are you playing and what role are we playing? And I would like the province to look at closing the injection site around that building to keep Calgarians safe around that area. But what the conversation has to have with them is, what does that look like for them as a compassionate care for the individuals that need those supports? So it's a very, I would say multifaceted approach to clearing up the safety in the city. So definitely we have a role to play when it comes to community standards and the community standards bylaw and supporting police and fire and transit safety. But then there's a whole other void that we play a supporting role with the province in making sure that they can do what they can do, like they have to do in order to make sure all Calgarians are safe as well.
Okay, what's your position on bike lanes, and do you expect to see more of them?
I don't think I'm expected to see more of them. My position is nothing in the city is permanent. Especially some of the bike lane pilots that we've seen in my communities, they were pilots and they're still pilots. But some of the bike lanes in like I would say the outskirts of the communities help, um, families and I would say very seasoned bike riders get to regional paths. And some people really like that. We also have, people that ride their bike downtown, but there is a concern about some of the bike lanes placed in front of some of the buildings that used to have parking or loading. There's accessibility issues, and especially within the inner core area. And I've had those conversations with those building owners. And so, are they appropriate there? Are they appropriate, in some of the communities that we see them? They have, I would say, some of them have actually stopped speeding. They've become like traffic calming measures. And if we have proof they're working there, okay, let's leave them. But to open up the conversation of where they're not working is appropriate. And like I said, like some of the buildings downtown are losing customers, some of the coffee shops are losing customers. There's accessibility issues because you can't park right next to the sidewalk because the bike lane's there. And it has caused some businesses, some hesitation of supporting maybe the bike lane from before, and they may have. So I think bike lanes, I don't think it's a permanent problem. I think they can always be fixed and removed if they're not working. But everyone's kind of making this a bigger deal than it is. And that's a notice of motion with 8 people saying remove bike lanes. That's not dealing with some of the bigger issues like mental health and addiction problems. So, I mean, bike lanes can be a story, but I don't know if it's really the biggest story for this election.
Okay. Now, as you look back over the last few years, what's your opinion, I guess, of the performance of the current mayor and the current council?
I will say, I mean, I am a sitting member of this council, and it's not a surprise to people that I've been on like kind of the minority side from day one. I didn't jump on the mayor's bandwagon to be doing what she and her chief of staff wanted to do right out of the gate. I was a little bit shocked how things kind of started in like when 2021, and it was very ideological and personal. And so I see that every day at council, and you can see who doesn't have a personal agenda. I don't have a personal agenda. You can see who has, you know, ideology driven ideas. I don't have those. And so in when I look at the past 4 years and why I'm running is because the pendulum swung so far to the, bringing ideology to, chambers instead of getting work done. And I'm very much of the mindset of getting work done. We're really behind. And, all I'll say about the mayor's performance is if many thought she was doing what Calgarians wanted, she wouldn't have another incumbent running against her. And the other thing is, you have members of council who have served only one term quit. So what did they expect this job to be when they took it? And so it's really telling what I think people thought this job was and just saw the opportunity of not running again and being like, okay, it's not for me. Fine. But there's some of us that are very passionate and, you can run for any seat you want, call yourself whatever you want. But at the end of the day, you're a public servant. And that's what this job is all about. And you're accountable to the people that put you in those seats.
Okay, last question for you, Sonia, is why should people vote for you?
I would say is first is what you see is what you get. I'm a trust trustworthy individual that listens to Calgarians, and I deliver results. I also can admit if I've made mistakes, I can own that. And, I'm running for mayor to not just make Calgary the safest city in Canada and, affordable, but to really turn things around where people trust City Hall again. And that's really important because the trust factor has lost. And I'm here to bring that back.
Okay, wonderful. Well, thanks so much, Sonya, for taking the time
Thank you,
today.
Mario.
Okay, that
Take
was
care.
Sonya Sharp, who is one of the candidates running for mayor of Calgary in the upcoming municipal election. I'm Mario Toneguzzi. Thanks for joining us today.